Welcome back to Nightly Noir, the channel all about dark mysteries and troubled characters. I'm back to ramble about a recent series that just started a few weeks ago, the Chaotix Casefiles. If you're not familiar, it's a podcast that recently got started by Sega, covering characters that are normally not very prominent in the Sonic series. But what's really awesome is they are taking it to the extreme with the very much tongue-in-cheek noir style. And I gotta say, it has been a really fun ride so far. I did want to give the series a bit of breathing room, just to kind of let some episodes air and get a feel for how the story's gonna go and the overall production. And so far, it's been really great, and I think there's enough content here now for me to, readily share my thoughts. This is going to be kind of similar to the last video, where I just kind of ramble on about the series, and hopefully a lot of you liked that last time. Starting right away, I have to say that this series really surprised me. It has a very high production value, and the sound effects that they use, as far as, for action scenes and things like that, are really, really well done. They really sell the idea that something is happening, despite not being able to see it. And the theme song, oh my gosh, the theme song goes way harder than I think it ever needed to. I did see that I believe it was written by Rebecca Sugar, which at this point doesn't really surprise me. But as far as just the overall value of the quality, it's really up there, way higher than I ever thought it would. Obviously, the incredible voice work, it's Matt Mercer and all of the original VAs from the original cast for the characters. It's really no surprise that most of the voice cast is doing a phenomenal job portraying these characters. And I gotta say, Keith Silverstein as Vector is a genuine highlight of the entire series. His narration and how he changes into the, detective type of character, it is very enjoyable. It's obviously kind of a parody, but, that's something that you kind of expect in a format like this. And of course, being Matt Mercer, he's doing a bunch of the extra background characters, including a more prominent character, the museum curator, Mr. Fitch, I believe. I could tell from a mile away that it was Matt Mercer, but, he's doing what he does. It's Matt Mercer. It's kind of what you kind of expect at this point. If you ever played the PS4 version of Spider-Man, Matt Mercer plays a lot of the civilians in that game, and if you keep your ear to the ground, you can kind of tell which ones are his and which ones aren't. Something of note here, Whisper and Tangle. In the most recent episode, Whisper and Tangle's characters got their first voice acting roles for the first time. Now, granted, I am not very familiar with these two characters. They originate from the IDW comics, and they're just not something that I'm too familiar with, but from what I got from the most recent episode, the voice actors are doing a pretty bang-up job. They convey the personalities of these two characters really well, despite, there's no visual to kind of feed off of. It's more just all audio. The voice actresses are doing a phenomenal job. I guess we can talk about the story. I'm not going to try to spoil too much in case you haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast, but honestly, the story is kind of, I would say, kind of formulaic, at least in terms of how it's presenting itself. But what's really fun is it is all told through the perspective of Vector, who is trying to embody hard-boiled crime novels and the noir protagonist style. We saw that in the episode 0, which was sort of like a prologue to the series. And what's also really funny is the entire story is narrated by him, but based on flashback scenes. He's talking about a recent case that led him up to the current moment where he's at, which, this isn't really spoilers, but the story does technically start with him and Sonic getting caught by Dr. Eggman, and Vector is basically telling all of these, case file type stories, laying out a mystery to basically buy them time to try to escape Dr. Eggman. Which I think is a pretty standard, well, I guess not standard, but a pretty decent way to structure a story, especially one that's set in the Sonic universe. So I'm not really upset about that at all. And it's essentially just a series of events that are happening with the Chaotix Detective Agency, like I mentioned in the previous video. Them going and trying to find out what is happening to these rare artifacts, which is where the museum curator comes in, and a bunch of, wacky hijinks ensue, as you kind of would expect from a product like this. It is Sonic the Hedgehog, after all, and the characters themselves are pretty cartoonish. Not to mention, the fact that these characters aren't very known. At least people outside of the fan base probably aren't familiar with them. So they do a lot to try to elevate who these characters are and really sell you on their personalities. But it is a really good balance. They do try to combine the noir style with, obviously plenty of comedy, and there's a decent balance. Vector seems to be trying to be more of the straight man, but he's also kind of goofy, but that's just his character in general. He takes himself a lot more serious than the rest, except for probably Espio. Espio's the true straight man of the group. He takes everything literally. He does not get nuance or understand social cues. It's kind of hilarious, in a way. And then you have Charmy, the intended comic relief of the group. Obviously, Charmy is the young, impressionable, naive type of character, and, definitely has had some controversy over the years of being, kind of overly annoying at times, but I think this version of the character definitely works better, I think, in this format. They seem to have dialed down some of the more annoying aspects and kind of went harder on the more naivete of the character. So I think that really works really well, and they all three just really play well off of each other. So it just brings a whole nother level of entertainment value to this project. And I think that just really speaks well to the writers of the story, the characters, and they really seem to understand what makes Vector, Espio, and Charmy work as a team. And I think that's a really great thing for this project. Another detail that I thought was interesting was just how much of a backseat Sonic took in this overall overarching story. He's at the beginning, and he's definitely featured in the prologue story of Episode 0, but very much not in the actual story itself. He's actually kind of an audience member. He asks questions throughout the episode. He kind of bookmarks the beginning and end of episodes, along with Dr. Eggman, who has definitely taken a very serious interest in Vector's story, mainly because of the artifacts that they're trying to look for in the story. But it was very surprising just how little Sonic actually had, and the role that he plays in this story. But I think it works really well because it gives more focus and credence to the Chaotix team, which is obviously what the focus should be on. But as far as the noir aspects, it's definitely mostly coming from Vector. And of course, the background music. The background music is very jazz and easy listening style music. So it definitely sells you on the idea that this is supposed to be a hard-boiled detective story with a lot of comedy mixed in. The action scenes are actually ridiculously good. Like I said earlier, the production value is top tier. They sound intense. They keep the listener engaged. At least from my point of view, I've never really felt like there was a lull in the pacing, and you really do feel like you are there in the action despite not being able to see it. The audio work was just really, really phenomenal. So I just have to give them kudos. They really did a good job of making it seem like you are really there in the scene with the Chaotix team. And of course, on top of everything else, what's really great is they are shining a light on less popular characters from the series. Now, this is kind of more of a personal note on my front, as far as, they're focusing on the Chaotix team, which is not a very popular team. It's not Sonic, it's not Shadow, it's not Tails or Knuckles or, the main people that you think of when you think of Sonic. They are focusing on people like Rouge the Bat. They're talking about places that are from like a game that wasn't very popular. They obviously brought in Whisper and Tangle, which, unless you read the comics, you have no idea who those people are. I didn't know who they were, except for, through pop culture references and stuff, I got an idea of who they were. But other than that, Sonic is a very minor character. He's essentially just at the beginning and end of the different episodes, kind of giving his feedback, because he's also listening to this story as it's being told. But overall, it's very much focusing on these lesser known characters, these less popular characters, and the Babylon Rogues too, which, they kind of probably saw a resurgence thanks to the most recent Sonic game, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. But yeah, you don't really see these characters very much, if at all. Team Chaotix was probably most prevalent in Sonic Heroes, and then they made some cameos in the Shadow the Hedgehog game, which, let's not talk about the Shadow the Hedgehog game, to be honest. But yeah, it's been a really fun ride. It's been a fantastic product. I can't recommend it enough, even if you're not necessarily a Sonic the Hedgehog fan. If you still kind of like, some goofier, somewhat cartoonish, but still down-to-earth, hard-boiled detective stuff, or at least, kind of like a parody of it, which is kind of what I figured. It's very much a parody of these types of stories and, that kind of thing. But I love it, and it's not every day that we get something like this in, the year 2026. Who would have thought that we would get a Sonic story that's styled in a noir, classic noir fashion? I'm loving it. And honestly, I hope you guys are too. If you haven't gotten the chance to listen to it, I highly recommend it. You can listen to it on just about any platform that has podcasts and stuff like that, like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, any of those. So I highly recommend it. And forgive my babbling and rambling, but at least I had some notes this time, so I didn't have to go too far. But hopefully you enjoy these types of videos, and hopefully there will be more to come in the coming days, and I will see you in the next one. This has been Nightly Noir, and have a good night.